Hey guys, it's really hot out, so I think today's gonna be a little bit of an indoor day. We're gonna see how red my face gets. So today I wanted to talk about something I've been seeing pop up a lot more lately, and that is sort of a sentiment around, I don't know, people being frustrated, specifically young people, being frustrated that we just keep seeing the same actors over and over again. Just like in my YouTube feed, I'll see like videos that are like Hollywood keeps casting the same 20 actors or something like that, and and I'll watch it. It'll just be somebody being like, "Oh, why does Hollywood just keep recasting Timothy Chalamet and fucking Zendaya and Austin Butler and everything? Like, can't we find any new actors? They're in everything now. It's like you can't watch anything without them." And I think I find myself like, I don't know. I find myself frustrated at this sentiment, mostly because it's not true, first of all, but also, there's like a reason why you feel like that. And in some of these videos, they'll address some of these things, right? So, there's the obvious point, which is that these are like the new crop of movie stars. These are like the hot new young people who are being cast in a lot of big ticket films now. These are like the big blockbuster movies, and of course, they want the blockbusters to be led by known talent. Especially if the blockbuster is based off of an original concept or something that doesn't immediately have brand recognition baked into it. And so now, if you don't have that to bank on, then you have to bank on having a recognizable, popular face as part of it at this point, right? That's like the obvious point, right? But then, I'll still see a lot of people be like, they could cast new people, right? They don't just need to do that. Like, they don't need to keep reusing the same people. And they get frustrated because, like, it feels like we keep seeing the same actors over and over again. And, I can relate to. No, I can't relate. I get the frustration with feeling like you only see the same people over and over again. Um, but if I could say something that is going to be possibly controversial, that sounds like a you problem, particularly with um, maybe expand what you watch because to be honest, those people are in that much stuff. I'll say. Um, a great example, Timothy Chalamet. Everybody's like, oh, I just keep seeing Timothy Chalamet in everything right now. And he is in one movie this year. He has one movie coming out later this year in December. It's called Marty Supreme. I'm actually really excited for it. And then in last year he was in two movies. Two. I don't know if you know how many movies are produced in a year. It's a lot more than two. For sure. Same thing with like Zendaya, right? Last year Zendaya was in two movies. This year she has possibly one coming out. We're gonna see when the drama comes out. That's with Robert Pattinson, right? And the only actor this year where I'm like, okay, this guy is like kind of everywhere right now. And I don't mean everywhere like on social media or whatever. But this guy is in everything. Is Pedro Pascal. He is in a lot this year. Now he's in The Last of Us. He's in Fantastic Four. He was just in Materialists, which I enjoyed. And then he had like two indies come out earlier this year called like Freaky Tales, and then I think the other one was called like The Invite or something like that. Not that a lot of these people are watching those necessarily. And then so big year for Pedro. And then next year he's got two movies. He's going back down a couple to I think a Mandalorian movie, and then he's got one of the Avengers movies, which a ton of people are going to be in. And so, that tends to happen with actors sometimes. Actors will have just a year where they just explode, right? Where they're in a ton of stuff, and they just over the past few years they filmed a lot of things, but all of those things accumulate and they don't necessarily come out sporadically, and so they just all happen to fall into 1 year, even though they were shot over probably a few years. As with the two indies that Pedro was in, these were movies that I think like premiered last year at like festivals or something, but then they didn't get distribution until this year. So they could have been movies that came out a year ago, but they didn't. The Last of Us and Fantastic Four were always intended to come out this year. And then Materialist, same thing, right? But yeah, these all just kind of huddled around together in the same release. But that's not super common. And we'll see over the next few years, Pedro's output will not be as enormous as it is this year. So that's an exception. That's like one person where it's like when somebody is like, "Oh, I keep seeing Pedro everywhere." It's like, "Okay, yeah, you're kind of right." But what I'd like to do is I'd like to take a look at why people might be feeling the way they are, because I don't think people are crazy. I just think they're wrong. So why do people feel like these actors, like Tom Holland, Zendaya, Timothy, Austin Butler, Glenn Powell, why do they feel like they just like can't get away from these actors, even though these actors are putting out maybe 2 movies a year? And I think it's a few things. First of all, we all are on social media and we see coverage of these people all the time, even when they're not doing a something film related. They're just like on social media, they're being covered, they're being talked about, their dating lives are being speculated on, stuff like that, right? And so, them as a topic is something that is harder to escape, especially when they're in the promotional phase of an upcoming film. Even though, like last year with like Timothy Chalamet, for example, he had 2 movies come out. He had Dune Part 2, and then he had A Complete Unknown, right? So the first half of the year, he's spending probably like 2 months or so promoting Dune Part 2. And this is coming off of his one release in 2023, Wonka. So Wonka came out in December of 2023. He obviously had to promote Wonka before that, and then into March of 2024, he had Dune. And so Timothy is, going from Wonka to Dune in terms of promotion. And so that's a few months of coverage on Timothy Chalamet. And then things get a little quiet for a bit, and then he reemerges around the fall time to promote A Complete Unknown. And with A Complete Unknown, that was a big Oscar player. And so, Oscar campaigns are huge and they take months and months and months. So this is like maybe 4 or 5 months of promotion for this film where they're slowly ramping it up over time. Timothy Chalamet is going out and doing more interviews. He's doing performances of Bob Dylan songs and stuff. And so even though last year he only had 2 movies come out, it feels like you're seeing him all the time. Because you kind of are. And I don't blame you for getting sick of seeing somebody over and over again. However, I would say that's more of a social media being connected to, the algorithm issue than them just being in too many movies. The other thing is we also are, especially if you follow film news, you're always being updated on casting announcements. And so a lot more stuff is being announced, and like so you'll see an announcement that like, oh, this actor's gonna lead this thing. And and if you see a few of those in a row, then you're just like, oh my god, I can't get away from this person. But these are announcements, for films that won't be out for the next like 1 or 2 years probably. And so, with the combination of the announcements, whatever they're promoting at the time, and then the actual release of the film, and then any other personal whatever drama or stuff being covered in their lives. And I know I keep going back to Timothy Chalamet. It's just he's a great example here. Like, you see videos of like him and the Jenner sister that he's dating. I can't remember if it's Kendall or Kylie. I can't remember. I don't. Yeah, but I've seen videos of like them at like I think like a tennis game or something like that, and so that's not even like he's not even promoting something. He's not even putting himself out there like that. It's just they're in public, they're being filmed, they're being talked about, and then same thing with like him. He was actually just here in Indy at one of the Pacer games because the Knicks played, and so he was here in Indy and he was like photographed, and so was like Spike Lee and Ben Stiller and stuff, and so yeah, it's one of those things where you continually see somebody because they're popular. But I want to kind of disprove the notion that Hollywood is not investing in new talent, right? Because I do think that they are, and it can come off like they're not, because as we've been talking about, people claim that they just keep seeing the same faces over and over again, but like I feel like there's like new batches of movie stars, like small batches, but new batches of movie stars are made every year, right? Where it's like what happens is like, so like last year, a great example is Mikey Madison. Mikey Madison was sort of a known actress before. You've seen her pop up in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Scream, Better Things, blah, 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 right? But she was never like a household name. And then, but then, she had this huge role in Nora. And so over the next, probably 5 or so years, you're going to see her pop up in a ton of stuff. And then you're probably going to have that same feeling where it's like, dude, like, she's just everywhere right now. And then same thing with like another person who kind of popped off last year, towards the end of last year, was Lily Rose Depp. With her performance in Nosferatu. A ton of people really loved her in that. So did I. She was amazing. And, she kind of proved she got out from under the shadow of The Weeknd in The Idol and Kevin Smith, because before that, like, if you're in the film world at all, then you primarily know her from Kevin Smith movies and The Idol. But then she did Nosferatu, and it's like, oh my god, she's great. And so now she's going to be a bankable star, especially with the Depp last name and then her talent, because she's a really great actress too. And so you're gonna see her start to attach herself to more projects, blah blah blah, right? And so, but those are two that were just sort of solidified last year. And then that's not even to speak of like stars who are like rediscovered, I guess. So like a couple great examples would be like I almost said Jennifer Connelly. Mandy Moore. No, Demi Moore. Demi Moore in The Substance was sort of like, oh my gosh, like everybody, remembers, like, oh, Mandy Moore, or not Mandy Moore, I keep saying Mandy Moore. And, everybody remembers that, like, Demi Moore is, like, awesome. And so you're going to start to see her pop up in a lot more stuff. The same thing sort of happened with, like, Brendan Fraser, kind of coming off The Whale, and he popped up in a Scorsese movie. He's got a movie coming out later this year. And then Jamie Lee Curtis, right? Jamie Lee Curtis was, she was kind of not in a ton of stuff, some TV stuff for a little while, but then she was in Knives Out, and then she was in, Everything Everywhere All at Once. And, and I say those like she keeps popping up and everything, but those are separated by like 3 years. But then it feels like you keep seeing her and everything because with, the public, she won an Oscar. And then, she's sort of she's reached the status of like being this like beloved figure in film by the public, and so we keep seeing her pop up in a ton of stuff. Although people aren't necessarily annoyed of like her or like maybe Willem Dafoe right now, because it seems like they are like by virtue of like their age, they're probably not getting offered leading roles as often. But it tends to be less noticeable when an actor is in a ton of stuff if they take on more supporting roles, because at that point they're not the face of a movie. And so I think a lot of people can get annoyed with these other actors who keep popping up and stuff because they're young, because they're hot, because they're whatever, but also because their faces are the movie. They come to represent the film as a whole. But I'm just here to say that it's not as crazy as you might think. This has been a thing throughout all of Hollywood history. Back in the day, the studios, they had like stables of actors, is what they would call it, where an actor would be signed to a specific studio, where they would only do movies by that studio, or if they wanted to do a movie for another studio, it would come at a hefty price. The studio would essentially lend another studio an actor. I guess like if a modern version of that existed today, it would be like Disney has Tom Holland, and so he can only do like Disney movies, and like Netflix has like Millie Bobby Brown, and so she can only do Netflix movies. But that is kind of what created a sort of movie star formula, because it ensured that studios wanted to invest in certain movie stars, make them bankable names, because the studio wants to make money. And didn't have like Spider-Man or Captain America back then to do that with. They could invest in creating movie stars that people wanted to go see, or adapting popular books or stage plays, or whatever, into films. But then obviously as time has gone on, we've seen that sort of shift over time, and take on different forms, but it's still sort of the same idea. I guess I would argue that we want movie stars. We want people with bankable names, because what it does is it ensures that more good original films are made. Because another popular complaint I see a lot from people is that Hollywood is out of ideas, Hollywood is out of original films or whatever. But it's annoying because I'll get that complaint from people, and then I'll be like, what were the last couple movies you watched? Oh, well, I saw the most recent Captain America, I saw Avatar, the new one, and then I saw some of the other they always like are tell me about the sequels and stuff that they see. It's like, well, okay, then obviously you're not interested in seeing whatever original stuff that the studios are putting out, because they are. And one example of a good original movie that came out and did well recently was Sinners. But Sinners was able to get the notoriety, the initial interest that it did, not just because it's a great screenplay, a great, movie, but because it had the likes of Michael B. Jordan, Haley Steinfeld attached to as the stars, and then Ryan Coogler as the director, and he was coming off of Black Panther. And so it could really only get that attention with those names attached. And that's the value of a movie star, either a movie star actor like Michael B. Jordan or a movie star director like Ryan Coogler, is that they're able to get interesting movies that the public wants to see, and, in generate profit, hopefully, because the alternative is that we're either in the indie world forever, which I don't mind. I love indie films, but a lot of people don't go to see them, or with like big budget original ideas, it ensures that the only big budget ideas that can get funded are not original ideas. And I guess maybe it could just be a thing too, where it's like, if you feel like you keep seeing the same amount of people, maybe watch more stuff, because the truth of it is that, like I said, a lot of these people are popping up in maybe 2 movies a year. And if there's so many movies that come out in a year with unknown actors, with new talent popping up. I already mentioned, Nosferatu had Lily Rose Depp, Anora had Mikey Madison. Great movie from last year that had an actress I'd never heard of was a Good One, directed by India Donaldson, and it starred an actress named Lily Colias. I think that's how you pronounce her name. But I'm definitely going to be interested in whatever she does coming up now because she's just like she was so good in that movie. And I could easily see her being, somebody that people like a lot because she's such a good actress. But yeah, like stuff like that, or even Challengers that came out last year. Obviously, I had seen Mike Feist in West Side Story, but I think it was the first performance I'd seen from Josh O'Connor, and now he's like big too. But also another point I'm going to make is it's also just wrong that Hollywood is getting the same actors for even the big budget stuff, right? So like a couple of the biggest movies of the summer so far have been Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon. These movies made a lot of money, not necessarily because they're stars, but because they're based on properties that were already hugely popular with families and children. But what they didn't do was cast, no super known movie stars that you feel like you've seen over and over again, and they cast relatively unknown actors. Lilo and Stitch, I haven't seen either of these movies to be honest, but Lilo and Stitch had actresses I'd never heard of playing Lilo and Nani, and hopefully, that can spawn off into them having very successful careers in the film industry. How to Train Your Dragon has the kid from The Black Phone, who I thought he was great in that, but like I don't think anybody would necessarily call him like a huge movie star. And then it also has the girl who was in, I think, The Last of Us or something. She she seems cool. But that's Hollywood, putting money into projects starring relatively unknown actors. Superman coming out in a few weeks and stars a guy who was really just known for like Pearl. He was a guy who got killed in Pearl. Spoilers. And then he has like a supporting role in Twisters. And that's our new Superman. So like now we have a new name. We have a new guy who's going to probably pop up in a lot more stuff over the coming years as, as his notoriety from Superman grows. So it's just like the idea that like we're not even getting new actors or whatever, new talent popping up in blockbusters, not even just indies like Good One, but like also in blockbusters, that's also just wrong. I understand frustration with like feeling like you see the same people over and over again, but I guess I get frustrated at the idea. No, I just get frustrated at people not thinking, right? Where it like, like if you just put a little bit of thought into it, then you realize that you're not correct. And I don't know, maybe I sound like a dick here, but that was what I wanted to talk about today. Hopefully my face isn't too bad. But yeah, maybe I don't know. If you like this, let me know. If you didn't, you'll probably, I don't know, probably stop watching a while ago. Bye.